Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting. The Are Those Things Supposed to Do That? Edition. Today is episode 188, Man's Life Saved by Emergency Breast Implants and Tooth Extraction Causes Another Man's Brain to Bleed. Well, here we are, back on old medical oddities lane, my friends. Just last week, we covered a first-of-a-kind case that definitely left many a business goose queasy, shocked, but relieved, as the story did end well. We spoke about the only known incident of a man who overdosed on cow's milk. And if you're asking how is that even possible, then I reckon you haven't had a listen. Just scroll on back just a smidge, and you'll see episode 187, an amphibian so bizarre it tells a platypus to hold my secretions, and the man who overdosed on milk. You'll also be in for quite a treat in the first half of the show. Speaking of which, in the first half of this show, another first and another treat. My friends, we're going to travel back in time just a smidge ourselves to 2023 to meet a 34-year-old man named Davy Bauer. And here are a few fun facts about Davy. He enjoys snowboarding, skateboarding, gaming, and golfing. He works in landscaping and hardscaping, which I had to look up, and thankfully it didn't lead me into any questionable sites on the internet. According to the one and only designer-landscapes.com, quote, hardscapes is a term used for patios, landscaped walkways, retaining walls, fire pits, landscape lighting, and more. They are landscape materials brought in to build structures in your yard, end quote. So, oh gosh, it's delightful. Now, a final fun fact about our dude Davy. He's the only person, so far, who had to have both lungs removed and breast implants inserted into his chest to save his life. Now, you probably have a few questions, like, I'm sorry, what? Both lungs removed? I think you need those, yes? Were they put back? And what's with the boobs? Well, all great questions. We will certainly get into what happened to Davy's lungs, why they had to be removed, and the extraordinary lengths a team over at Northwestern Medicine had to resort to keep him alive. Then after the break, a medical case that will not improve your frequency to the dentist. But I assure you, this event only took place thanks to those rare instances where every ailment known and hidden aligns perfectly to cause one hell of a medical oddity. We'll be sticking around in 2023, but heading on over to Australia, where a man in his 60s was having a couple of very difficult weeks. One day, his general practitioner diagnosed him with a suspected case of Parkinson's, and the next, he's at the dentist having 2 teeth pulled. My friends, who would have known that the proximity of these 2 instances, plus a handful of hidden ailments, would cause a goddamn brain hemorrhage? Well, we will get into the series of events and tests which occurred to help answer what in the holy hell happened here. In the meantime, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my understandably anxious business goose. To begin, you'll need to vacuum and tidy up the old time machine because we're all squeezing in and taking it back just a bit to April of last year. We've landed in the parking garage of a hospital in St. Louis, Missouri, and the spot we have has a great view of the emergency room, where Susan Gore just admitted her boyfriend, 34-year-old Davy Bauer. Now, thanks to the extraordinary leaps and bounds in vaccines and our understanding of viruses, the flu is more of a week-long nuisance for most of us, but not for all of us. For example, people over the age of 65 and under the age of 5 can face serious complications, and so can smokers. Turns out, Davy picked up the habit at 21, typically smoking a pack of cigarettes a day until quitting in 2014. And like a lot of people at the time, he chose vaping as a way to wean himself off the addiction, thinking it was safer. But as he told news.nm.org, quote, "Vaping felt better and I thought it was a healthier alternative, but in all honesty, I found it more addicting than cigarettes," end quote. So, for the next 9 years, Davey vaped daily, and life was life. Until 2023, when the average flu revealed the damage done to his body. With what words Davey could get out, he described a near impossibility to breathe, which led the medical staff to needing an x-ray of his chest stat. What they saw, well, let me quote Dr. Rade Tomik for this doozy. He's a pulmonologist and medical director of the Northwestern Medicine Caning Thoracic Institute lung transplant program. Quote, "Davey's lungs were so heavily infected that they started to liquefy. If you looked at his x-ray, there was nothing left. His lungs were completely filled with pus," end quote. Well, that is one hell of a sentence, and it probably distracted you from the fact that Dr. T is from Northwestern Medicine in Chicago, so put a pin in this hospital. We will get to it very shortly. In the meantime, back in St. Louis, Missouri, the extremely fragile Davey was unable to use his lungs. The staff had no choice but to put him on something called extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, or ECMO for short. And if that sounds intense, it fucking is. Long story short, it acts as temporary artificial lungs by removing blood from a patient and oxygenates it before returning that blood to the body. The medical staff provided a 1-2 punch of ECMO and antibiotics to fight off the infection, but nearly a fucking month later, Davey's condition hadn't improved at all. This infection was so intense and Davey's practically non-existent lungs were so weak, the drugs and the machine had barely any impact. It was becoming ever more clear that Davey was going to need a lung transplant, but not for one, for both. And this was going to be one hell of a challenge. For you see, a staggering surgery like this on a healthy patient is intense enough, but Davey's situation takes it to a whole other level. As Dr. T explained, quote, "When we received a call from Davey's medical team in St. Louis, we thought we could help him, but it was very clear he wouldn't survive the transplant in his current condition. He needed to clear the infection before we could list him for transplant. But the only way to do that was to remove both lungs. This was uncharted territory for us, but our team knew if we couldn't help Davey, no one else could," end quote. Well, my friends, hold on to your beating chest. Here's a quick fun fact about our lungs. Not only do they help you breathe and shit, bringing oxygen to your brain and all. I wonder if the mic picked that up. Just ignore that. Not only do they help you fucking breathe, get this, they prevent your chest cavity from collapsing in on your heart. So, here's the rub. My sweating business goose. The team over at Northwestern Medicine not only had to keep Davey on ECMO and remove his freaking lungs, they had to stop the infection, which would take days. This means they needed to find a way to prevent Davey's chest from collapsing in on his heart while this took place. So, what to do? Well, if you said to yourself, just stick a couple of double D's in there and he'll be fine. Yeah, you're right. Let's get into it. Quote, "One of our plastic surgeons was very gracious to give us a rapid-fire course on the different types, shapes, and sizes of breast implants. So we picked out a couple of options, and some of them were easier than others to mold inside Davey's chest, with the double D option being the best," end quote. Explained Dr. Ankit Bharat, Chief of Thoracic Surgery and Director of the Caning Thoracic Institute. He continued saying, quote, "I never imagined we'd be using double D breast implants to help bridge a patient to lung transplantation. But our team is known for taking the most difficult cases and thinking outside the box to save lives," end quote. He told news.nm.org. Well, my friends, yes, it's time. Please head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post. Yes, of course, I have photos of the operating room and the breast implants waiting to fill Davy's chest cavity. I mean, who do you think I am? In one picture alone, there's got to be at least like 100 clamps and instruments. It is just an intense scene, and it's intense, but necessary, and it fucking worked. My friends, now hold on to your pulsing cheeks, because things are gonna move fast. On May 26th, out went Davy's lungs and in went the boobs. With the infected material gone, his body was able to fight off the infection, making him officially a candidate for double lung transplant. Remarkably, Davy did not need to wait long for a donor. The next fucking day, on May 27th, the team received news of a match. And on May 28th, the boobs came out and the donor lungs went in. For the next 4 months, Davy spent time in recovery, being monitored by the team at Northwestern Medicine and his special lady. Grab a fucking Kleenex. Quote, "Still to this day, I can't believe Davy lived without any lungs. He was breathing, blood pumping without lungs," said Susan Gore to news.nm.org. "While we waited inside the hospital room, I would take a breath in and say, 1 breath for me and 1 for Davy." It's hard to wrap my mind around it, and I'm still in awe that Davy was able to do this. It truly shows his strength. End quote. Well, my friends, if you still have our social media stuffs open, swipe past the breast implant photo, and you shall see Davy recovering, and then eventually standing right next to Dr. Barat. According to his GoFundMe page, to help pay for all the goddamn medical bills because America, as of September 2023, Davy was able to start eating solids and drinking liquids. He was moved to a rehab facility where he's scheduled to stay for another 18 months. But don't worry, he'll be there with his 2 dogs, Penny and Bear. Also very American, Davy joked to news.nm.org, quote, "I plan to get a t-shirt made that says Double D Davy on it and change all my gaming profiles." But in all seriousness, I'm so proud to be the first Northwestern Medicine patient to undergo this innovative procedure. And I hope this medical first paves the way for more critically ill patients to receive lung transplant in the near future. End quote. Yes, my friends, breasts. What can't they do? After the break, we're moving from the chest to the head and from Chicago to the land down under. Please join me in Australia, where a trip to the dentist led to a trip to the emergency room. Stay tuned.
O'Reilly. Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Hey there, I'm Dylan Lewis, one of the hosts of Motley Fool Money. Each weekday on Motley Fool Money, we talk through the business news you need to know and the stories moving stocks on Wall Street. On weekends, we dive into the industries shaping tomorrow and host the experts, authors, and executives that understand them. Tune in for insights, a long-term perspective on investing, and of course, stock ideas. Plenty of them. To quote a listener, it pays to listen. Check us out and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
And we're back. We are so back. And my friends, I ask, how do you usually feel after a trip to the dentist? Don't all yell at once. I'm sure some of you feel relief that the whole visit is over, maybe anxious because you have to return, or maybe for the small weirdo fraction of you, you feel joy. That's okay. That's okay. We still love you. Now, for one man in his late 60s, what he felt, well, it was the complete opposite of joy. In fact, it was downright horrifying. Just 30 minutes after having 2 teeth pulled, he was overcome with dizziness, which eventually became so intense it led to vomiting. The situation escalated as the world itself completely changed around him. As reported by Emily Cook of Live Science, his vision was distorted to the point where he saw objects as if they'd been rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise. End quote. I believe it's time to head to the emergency room. My friends, join me, will you, at the Royal Perth Hospital in Perth, Western Australia, where this patient's day was somehow about to become a whole lot worse. While being examined, the medical staff took note of high blood pressure, put a pin in that, and even more concerning were his eyes, which flickered to the left, and his gait, which kept veering to the right as he walked. All signs, right now, were pointing to a stroke. But to be sure, and to make the proper diagnosis, an urgent CT scan had to be performed. And yes, I do have that CT scan. Yes, my friends, please, everyone, glide on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post. When you get past Davies Double D's, you'll see this patient's CT scan. And I'm going to pull it up here myself. Now, yeah, although there is a small white arrow pointing to it, let's just say, I think even without that arrow, you can tell something is present here that just shouldn't be. And for my popular business goose who are just too busy to take a look, I will describe it for you. Please go ahead and point to your left ear. Go ahead. There you go. Perfect. Great. Now move your finger slightly behind it. Okay. Now imagine sticking your finger 2 or 3 inches into your skull. Okay. Well, there it is. Now on the CT scan, it looks like a round white ghost about the size of a quarter, but 'tis no ghost. This was an intercerebral hemorrhage, or an ICH. My friends, the lower left corner of his brain was bleeding. Now, you probably have a lot of questions like, oh, that's not good. How? How did this happen? And was it really from a dentist appointment? Great questions. Let's get into it. According to Emily Cook, quote, ICH is a common form of stroke that can be triggered by many things, including abusing drugs like amphetamine, brain cancer, physical trauma, and even extremely low temperatures. For example, one woman with a history of high blood pressure developed it after taking part in the ice bucket challenge. End quote. Yeah, that fucking happened. Now, our patient didn't abuse drugs, have cancer, or an ice bucket. But he did have high blood pressure. But, and big but here, not all folks with high blood pressure get ICH. So, there's another part of this mystery that needs to be solved. When diving into the patient's medical history, the staff learned just 6 weeks prior, his general practitioner suspected he had Parkinson's disease, which, as explained by clevelandclinic.org, is a progressive condition where a part of your brain deteriorates, causing more severe symptoms over time. While this condition is best known for how it affects muscle control, balance, and movement, it can also cause a wide range of other effects on your senses, your thinking ability, and mental health, and more. End quote. Now, thankfully, at this stage in the patient's life, doctors didn't find any issues with the blood vessels in his brain. However, after having a glance at the CT scan performed by his general practitioner, there were signs of white matter disease. Now, what in the holy hell is this? Don't worry, I got you. I gave it a Google, and no big deal, but the white matter of your brain is made up of a large network of nerve fibers that allows the exchange of information and communication between different areas of the brain. La-di-da. And it's called white matter because those nerve fibers are covered in a protective sheath called myelin, which gives the tissue its white color. When this network shows damage, it's called white matter disease, which is an umbrella term, and it's usually caused by reduced blood flow to an area. So, what is going on here? Our patient's blood vessels look fine on the outside, but something is reducing the blood flow to the left side of his brain on the inside. And the situation is so sensitive that even a moment of elevated blood pressure or blood flow to the brain causes an overflow or ICH. Well, the team at Royal Perth Hospital had to dig deeper. So my friends, dust off your finest DNA analysis machine. We are going in. After many clickety-clack calculations were made, the team discovered he, quote, had a mutation on a gene called Notch3, which is associated with a rare inherited disease that causes the walls of blood vessels to thicken, reducing the flow of blood to the brain. This condition is known as, and please bear with me here, this condition is known as cerebral autosomal dominant heteropathy with subcortical interfrax and leukoencephalopathy. I'm sweating. I am in sweat. Okay, look, it's also called Cadacil for short, okay? End quote. That was from livescience.com. My voice broke. Goddamn, my lush business goose. We made it past that fucking name, and the team discovered that this guy had a gene mutation that caused some of his brain's blood vessels to thicken. There it is. Round of applause. Yay. Now, according to the National Institutes of Health, Cadacil is rare, but the stats say it affects 2 in every 100,000 people. 2 in every 100,000. In my humble opinion, the word rare needs to be revised here. Anyway, the case study authors noted that blockages may be common with patients with Cadacil, but hemorrhages are not. So my friends, our patient with Cadacil is the first to have an ICH after a stressful dentist visit. So once again, round of applause. This is a first. Thank you. Now, you may be wondering if this guy is the first to have an intracerebral hemorrhage from having Cadacil and then going to the dentist. Does that mean other folks had an ACH caused by whatever underlying medical issue they had and went to the dentist? Well, I'm so glad you asked. I'm happy to report that yes, yes, but it's rare. And when I say rare, I actually mean it. Only 3 other cases in medical history have been reported. The last took place about 30 years ago with a 52-year-old woman experiencing a painful abscess. Unfortunately, she did not survive. So, the moral of the story here. Fuck if I know. Thank you for listening, rating, subscribing, telling your friends about this man's boobies and how life-saving they are. They prevented his chest from collapsing in on his heart, and it's a whole thing. Please tell them about his boobs. And then tell your dentist about the tooth extraction case. I'm sure they'll be so thrilled to hear it. And a big toothy thanks over to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you'll love the other podcasts in this family. And please, stay interesting.